Hello, I'm Craig, and welcome to another episode of Football Kit Memories, the football podcast that gets under the shirt. In today's episode, I'm joined by the founder and first editor of Loaded magazine, James Brown. James recently published his memoir, Animal House, which covers his life both before and after the magazine, and for me it was an excellent read in the way it honestly reflects both the highs and the lows of celebrity and excess during the 1990s. James initially began writing in Leeds during the 80s, where he turned his passion for music into his own successful fanzine. A move to the more established music press in London followed, first at Sounds and then at the NME, before James was given the opportunity to set up Loaded, a title that essentially redefined male culture in the media. Our chat covers the music, magazines and mayhem that James describes so well in his book, as well as his passion for football and Leeds United. Remember, you can listen to this and other episodes of Football Kit Memories on all major audio platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please do like, follow and share, but above all, please do enjoy the podcast. Okay, so today on the podcast, I'm joined by the founder and very first editor of Loaded magazine. It's Mr. James Brown. How are you, James?
I'm great, Craig. Thanks. How are you?
Very well, thanks, mate. It's great to have you here. So look, James, I've just read your memoir. I've just finished it recently, Animal House, which covers your life in what you very aptly subtitled the book, Music, Magazines and Mayhem. And I read it, I really enjoyed it, and I just thought it'd be great to get you on here for a bit of a chat. So just thanks so much for making the time, mate. I want to kick off with the book and just ask you very broadly, how was that experience for you writing that book, putting all those memories together?
To be honest, it was really difficult, which I hadn't experienced ever before, really, as a writer. And I've written a book before that about playing football called Above Head Height, which was largely just my memories and opinions.
Right.
And that came pretty easy. But as you know from reading the book, it's not as obvious as people might have thought the book might have been. It's not just a list of anecdotes about my time as a writer on the NME or, the glory years of being a very successful magazine editor. There's a lot of personal stuff in there about my mum's illness and growing up with that, and then also my own addiction and recovery from that. So getting my head around the balance of being as honest about that and revelatory about stuff I've never talked about really in public, with also, the totally self-indulgent, wild and fun times.
Yeah.
So it was difficult to sort of balance those two, that really just to address them and put them together. And so it was hard going by the end. I mean, it took me, I think it was 5 years from when it was commissioned, but
oh, wow.
Some of those pieces I'd written 10 years ago.
Wow.
And,
okay.
I first mooted the idea of writing a book when I was at GQ, and I went to see a famous agent and he said, yeah, we'll do this.
Yeah.
And then I just didn't bother. But I think the book's better for me waiting years later, although it means I don't have as much visibility and profile as I did back then. I think it's a better book for being able to look back on it.
Okay.
People are interested in the 80s and the 90s,
Yeah.
The Return of the Roses and the Mondays and obviously Oasis and Blur at the moment. There's a fascination for that in the same way as, when I was young, people would look back and were interested in the Doors in the 60s and the Rolling Stones. So I think it benefits as a history, it works as a history book, really.
Yeah. A lot of people nostalgia for the 90s. You actually touched on a question I was going to ask you, actually. There's a lot of light in the book, but there's also a lot of dark, as you mentioned. And I think you do a really good job of explaining, look, the amazing times you had, like the kind of hedonism and stuff like that, but it certainly doesn't glorify that. And it does talk about the dark times as well. Was that a deliberate thing? You wanted to present both sort of sides of things?
Well, I didn't want to glorify the excess.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, Loaded was far more excessive in terms of the level of narcotic consumption and drinking and fun that we had than we even put in the magazine.
Okay.
So obviously, there were things that were going on in the country for people who were going out at the time. The kind of ecstasy exploded, the rave scene at the end of the 80s and sort of mid to late 80s. And then there was a wave of cocaine followed into the country that became very common use for a lot of people going out,
Okay.
not just where it had once been, the drug of film stars and rock stars and probably gangsters and so on. It became a very common thing in big cities. And so I kind of played it down a bit, to be honest.
Okay.
I didn't. And the reason I put the recovery from alcoholism and addiction in there is because that we'd flown the flag for excessive consumption in Loaded, and because I'd gone through the consequences myself.
Yeah.
I didn't want to tell anybody how they should live their lives. I don't have a problem with other people do drugs, it's their choice.
Right.
Uh, but it's I also wanted to show give an opportunity to show that actually you can get beyond it and get a different way of life without life becoming boring.
Yeah. That's really interesting. As I say, I think you present it in a really good way. It's kind of the light and dark, as I say. Reading the book, I think there's two real kind of key passions for you that stand out. And obviously they found their home in Loaded very much so. One of which is football, which we'll come on to in a moment, but the other is music, right? And
Yeah.
you started out in the fanzine culture, the 80s. I just wanted to ask you a bit more about what that was like and starting up your own fanzine, what that whole era was like for you.
But it was great, really. I mean, it was the only thing I could possibly have done. I
Right.
wanted I wanted to play for Leeds United. I was quite a clever footballer, but I wasn't strong.
Okay.
I never even had pasta till I was like 19.
Right.
Never ate any vegetables, apart from occasionally peas. I was a really skinny kid. I didn't eat much when I was really young.
Right.
I was scared of eating, which will surprise people who knew me later in life.
Okay.
Um, so I just wanted I wanted to play for Leeds. I knew I wasn't going to play for Leeds by the time I was about 10,
Right.
and I wasn't selected for the City Boys, even though I played for the years older than me at school.
Okay.
I was just so skinny, and small. And so there weren't any jobs. And it sounds strange to say that now, but in 1983, when I was coming into my last year of school, there was huge mass unemployment. The miners' strike followed on from that. There was a lot of social unrest and conflict and economic disparity between, the yuppies that Thatcher was encouraging in the city of London,
Mm,
the former industrial heartlands of the UK, the car plants, the mines, the steel works.
mm,
This was an economic downturn, and it was the same in Leeds. I didn't know anybody with a job at all,
mm.
which sounds really strange to say that, but I didn't. And so I found these fanzines on political marches and at gigs and in record shops, and started collecting them, and realised that there wasn't really any barrier to doing one,
Right.
because I used to be involved in things like Rock Against Racism and the Anti-Nazi League and the CND when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I knew where you could print leaflets.
Uh-huh. Okay.
It was just me and three other kind of young punky kids
Yeah.
started this fanzine. And then after one issue, two dropped away. And then after about 3 or 4 issues, then the guy started he wanted to do a more hardcore. He was really into the hardcore scene.
Right.
Um, and there was quite a big local kind of squat punk scene in Leeds as well. The most famous of them, well, the only famous band would be Chumbawamba within that scene.
Right. Okay. All those years
That
back.
was
Okay.
so that was it really. I loved reading The Enemy. In The Enemy, I found voices that were similar, saying similar things and behaving in a way that the teachers would be telling me not to behave like.
Okay.
They were lippy, they were smart, thought they were great, were noisy. I mean, just The Enemy would it was as much the tone of voice and the familiarity, and also, kind of the younger version of The Enemy in color and gloss was
Mm.
smash hits. It was set up by the same guy who'd made The Enemy great in the 70s, Nick
Okay.
Logan. And I was a first generation smash hits readers. And even though Smash Hits was still really, really good magazine when it sold 1 million copies, and it really was super high gloss pop,
Yeah.
when it started, it just had all the bands, the good bands that were going in the charts. So that would have been the punk bands that lasted through into new wave.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'd have people like the Undertones or Public Image Limited or the Stranglers or Susie Sue or Paul Weller on the Jam on the front.
And smash hits. Wow. Okay, I didn't know
So
that.
that was an absolutely great magazine, and obviously it had all the lyrics as well. So they were the two magazines really that, and then Sounds magazine, which was another big inky rock weekly.
Mm.
It's a little bit easier, a little less highbrow than the NME, um, and that was really what I did instead of getting a further education. I didn't finish my A levels. I didn't go to university or to a college or anything like that. I just read these magazines, and they were like when I was unemployed in like 84, 85, they were like a beacon.
Yeah.
You know, I'd go to the shop and read them and decide. I'd look to see which one had the specials, the Undertones, the Jam, the Clash, bands that I liked. And
Yeah.
I'd just buy which, it was usually Enemy or Sounds. I would buy whichever one had the band that I like in. And then as I got a bit older, I used to get frustrated with it. By the time I'd been doing my fanzine for a couple of years, there was genuinely a really big underground of publishing in Britain.
Yeah.
You could tell me, you could give me a city from Spalding, Lincolnshire, to Coventry, to different parts of Edinburgh and Glasgow, and I could tell you the know Blackpool, I could tell you Blackburn, I could tell you the
Yeah.
name of fanzines. We all used to write to each other and swap fanzines, and it was a genuine underground. And they were all the way they worked economically was you had to sell them.
Yeah.
Most, no, 99% of them wouldn't have had adverts in. And you had to go and sell them. So you'd meet these other fanzine writers as well at gigs, and they put you up on the bedroom floor or the
Yeah.
spare bed or the sofa or whatever, or a band would get you in on the guest list if you showed up early, and then they'd give you a lift home. And
Right.
I once got a lift from London to Leeds with a band called the June Brides, who were kind of a C86 era indie band, and
Okay.
they weren't. I wasn't even going to their gig. They just gave me a lift home. It was like a network you could use to get lifts, and I remember that because it was very kind of them to do that. But they also had an armchair in the back of the van,
What?
a big stuffed armchair surrounded by black amps and guitar cases and cymbal boxes and stuff like that. And yeah, they were brilliant times. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't remember eating much. I remember living off crisps, bread, and and then also there was an underground of bands that were kind of fanzine level bands, and some of them made it big
Mm.
later. So there were bands I was discovering about as I was kind of breaking into the music papers and writing gig reviews for Sounds and NME. They started to get big, and I must just made myself noticeable because
Yeah.
people started, the Sounds offered me work, and then the Enemy poached me from Sounds, and by then bands that I would have been seen playing to like 30 people
Yeah.
were getting bigger record deals. So, bands like The Farm, James, Pulp, Chumbawamba I mentioned, Happy Mondays. These were all bands that I saw when they were really small.
Yeah.
And then they became big. Age of Chance was another one that I wrote a cover story on, mainly because I'd written about them and then they had a hit. So the paper put my little story big onto
Yeah.
the
Okay.
to the cover.
So you were
Uh,
there at the kind of grassroots thing. That's what I found quite interesting in the book, that there was this community of people, because other writers you were talking about in the fanzine movement seem to kind of get these roles at places like Sounds and the NME, like you were doing as well, right? So you
yeah,
kind of all come up together, which is really interesting.
yeah, it was a good time, and that's really where I learned initially how to do a magazine and also how to sell a magazine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this is where you do all this work, and then you work for Sounds, as I say, and the NME as well. You're really successful at the NME, and then you get this opportunity to create Loaded.
Yeah,
I guess, like, what was the initial vision for it? You're combining music and football, I'm guessing, was the main kind of pull of
literally was what it said.
it.
It said, I mean, it was a sheet of paper, uh, about 400 words long, and it said a magazine that I would read that created generational tension with existing titles, that featured up and coming stars or guys who were knackered and past it with great stories.
Yeah, Yeah.
It would have football, music, comedy, travel. I mean, it was all the only thing that wasn't on that. The three things that weren't on that first piece of paper was there wasn't a name because
Okay.
the name was irrelevant. Um, it's like if you've been around with enough small bands, you know the ones that make it are the ones that spend their time writing songs or perfecting how they look, not trying to work out what the name is.
Yeah. Okay.
I met so many bands who had great names, but they didn't have great songs.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
They didn't look too good. So they didn't have a name, and it didn't have any girls in it. I
Right.
wasn't I wasn't bothered about that, and it didn't have any fashion in it. And
Hmm.
my boss, Alan Lewis, had been my editor on NME. He'd he was the guy that got IPC to launch it, and he said, "You've got everything young men are into apart from girls, um, and then you've also, if we put fashion in it, we can sell adverts for fashion."
Aha. Right. Okay.
So that they were the two major changes, and then I just selected a group of people I knew. Along the way, I brought Tim in, who was a Jam fan and a Leeds fan. I brought Mick Bunnage in, who now does the modern Toss cartoons.
Okay.
And I brought Mick in early on. I brought a writer called John Wilde, and John invented the columns Great Moment in Life and Greatest Living Englishman, which was really two of the great staples of the magazine because they were the sort of things that we would talk about in the pub
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
or in a car or on a train or a coach on the way to a match.
Yeah.
You'd kind of dwell on this semi-hungover nostalgia, things from your childhood or films you'd seen once. Because you have to remember the things weren't readily available then.
Yeah. Of course.
Like now, when we could name a footballer from Brazil in 1954 and go off and find out everything about him.
Yeah.
Kind of information was shared through kind of bootleg videos of Clockwork Oranges or tapes of Lou Reed albums or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so that it was kind of like, as I put at the very beginning of the book, Loaded became like a second childhood for me.
Right.
In that we were having a tremendous amount of fun. We were fairly irresponsible in that we didn't. I mean, I was responsible for getting this multi-million pound making magazine out every month.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were good at that as well. The people that I selected to write and photograph and lay out the magazine were very good at what they did. But we, apart from announcing all the awards we won, we did our best to make it look slapdash and easy.
Right. Okay.
But it wasn't. There were some brilliant sub editors on there that helped put it together. And designers as well.
Do you feel like you carried through any of that kind of like attitude you had in the fanzine era through to Loaded as well?
Yeah, because Loaded was. I mean, Alan McGee once said it was like a fanzine crossed with Penthouse.
Okay.
At the time, I remember bristling a bit, but I quite like it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, the I mean, we never had negative stuff in Loaded, and that was a deliberate thing because the pervading attitude at NME, certainly by the time I left, was often one of cynicism.
Okay.
And the idea was go on, prove yourselves to us. That's what we felt as writers.
Right.
Unless you found something that you loved, and then you'd be all over it, which obviously was also going on all the time. But we were frequently very dismissive of things we didn't really love.
Okay.
And I think that was heartbreaking for a lot of bands.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
25 years later, I'd see my name mentioned in a group discussion or on Facebook, somebody slagging me off because I'd once not been very nice about their single review. It's kind of like sort of weird. It's like, no, I was a kid. I was 20 years old.
Wow. Okay.
But so at Loaded, I wanted everything to be really, really upbeat and positive. I wanted to share things that we loved and we discovered and we enjoyed doing. And I wanted there to be very little distance between the writers and the readers.
Yeah.
I wanted them to feel like they were part of what was going on, and they were. The readers sent so much stuff in. I mean, obviously nowadays the readers have their own magazines, which is social media,
Yeah.
or the entry levels to media now are just fucking at the ground floor. Anyone can walk in, whether it's doing what we're doing today,
Yep.
set up a podcast, or doing vlogging, or creating TikTok films, or whatever the hell the next one will be.
Yeah.
But back then it wasn't like that. There were some magazines for men. There were fashion magazines and like Arena, and there were there were American magazines that were about man doing his best, like GQ and Esquire, which none of them sold
Mm.
many copies.
Okay.
But there was nothing that just said, by the way, here's Gazza, he's amazing.
Coming up, James discusses football as well as his 3 favourite football shirts. So having that changing face of culture in the 90s and being at the forefront of that, I wanted to ask, football featured really heavily in the magazine, and
Yeah,
like you mentioned, features and old footballers with great stories like George Best. You
yeah.
featured like new footballers or current footballers at the time. Do you think Loaded had an impact on the changing face of football throughout the 90s? Because obviously it
Yeah,
changed so much after Italian 90, right?
well, definitely, because as you said, it was in every issue, and it
Yeah.
was in more than once every issue. And I think, if you did pick up a more mature, older, style-orientated magazine like GQ or Arena or even the Face or things like that, they never had footballing.
Mm.
Maybe Gary Lineker was probably the only footballer ever on the front of Arena.
Okay.
And when he was squeaky clean Gaz, captain of England,
Yeah.
you know. So although we only had a couple of footballers on the cover, I think for me it was just a staple. Basically I wanted to get into football for free. That was another thing, right? Like I'd been doing to get in to gigs for free forever.
Yeah.
And football was changing because suddenly you could watch I mean, I had Sky when it started because somebody in the flats I lived in had it, and we found out we could all get it for free off the one feed.
Wow. Okay.
And I remember one of the first weeks, they only had about 8 programs. They kept repeating over and over again.
Yeah.
One was a film with Virginia Madsen, and another one was Sheffield United versus someone. It'd be on like 3 times a day.
Just repeating the same game.
Yeah, it would literally, the game would be on Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, Tuesday at 4 o'clock, Thursday morning at 10. They didn't have enough content.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of like Loaded coincided with that kind of much broader delivery of televised football. Um, but also, I just knew it was part of our lives. Around that time, if you went to a music festival like the Reading Festival and went backstage, all of the record executives and the A&R people literally, because they didn't want to talk about work, they were all talking about football.
Right. Okay.
Literally, everybody would be stood around in a blue fleece talking about, and combat trousers, talking about how Luton Town were doing, or
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
or Swansea or Leeds or Man City or whatever. And it was just, I don't know why that was, but I mean, people, I guess when you live in a world where music is your job as well as your main passion, you want to have someone else that you talk to in the same way as maybe a lot of people have got a job. If a load of people are estate agents, when
Mm.
they go to the pub or away for a weekend, they don't want to talk about us being estate agents, even if they enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
talk about property.
Yeah.
They talk about something else they're really into. So that football, I just noticed how everybody was glued together by football in non-football environments.
Mm.
I used to play football a lot, through my NME years, and so it just seemed obvious there was nothing that mixed football and music.
Interesting. So, well, look, we can talk about your personal relationship with football then, James. You grew up
Yes.
in Leeds, right? You've picked 3 shirts today we're going to go through. You grew up in Leeds, and the first
Yeah.
shirt that you've chosen to talk about is a Leeds Admiral yellow away shirt from the mid-70s. Talk to me
Yeah.
about this one.
Well, interestingly, that is the first ever official away kit,
Uh-huh.
an English kit. And I don't mean Leeds had, any English club had.
Okay.
And they had a guy in the early 70s. He originally went to Spurs, a guy called Paul Trevelyan.
Right.
He's an illustrator as well. He does You Are the Ref. And Paul had told me that he'd done some work with Elvis at one point, and he'd seen stuff Elvis was doing with marketing.
Okay.
And he took this to Spurs, and they weren't interested. So he went to the champions at the time, Leeds.
Yeah.
And Don Revie said to him, if you could take this medicine ball in the stomach from Jack Charlton, I'll do it.
Okay.
So through this ball, I mean, Paul's a really small guy, big character, small physique. And They did that, and they started this amazing period of marketing years before it became common. So we had the smiley badge on the shirt, which looked
Yeah,
like, which later was appropriated by Acid House, the smiley.
yeah,
We had blue tags that you with a piece of string that kept the socks up but had the number on.
yeah.
They had tracksuits with the players' surnames on the back. Before the game, they would line up like the royal family and wave at the crowd like the Tiller girls.
Right. Okay.
They would boot plastic footballs into the crowd with all pictures, little illustrations and printed autographs on.
Yeah.
So they were like, Redview was quite, you know, visionary about that. And I'm just reading the book about Admiral at the moment,
Okay. Yeah.
documentary, and there's loads and loads about Leeds. Leeds was the club that really changed them. But that shirt was the first official shirt that I had. It was yellow, long sleeved, air text, blue and white stripes down the side. It had a soft collar
Mm.
and buttons, and it was a fucking great shirt.
It's lovely, like a polo shirt, isn't it?
Yeah, but long sleeve polo, but much lighter. It was like it was a fabric that had been introduced for the desert rats
Okay.
in the war.
Yeah.
In hot climates, and these guys had brought it back in for sportswear. And there's actually a good picture. Neil Redfern, the former Leeds coach and Charlton player,
Right.
Barnsley player, wearing one as a kid with his dad. And I've somewhere I can't find it. I'm not able to find it for either football book or my memoir. Maybe dad's got it. I've got a picture of me wearing that shirt, and it was just a beautiful thing. And for me, it's a memory of that era.
Mm.
Um, I just was writing about this last night. When I was really young, I lived opposite Alan Clark, the England and Leeds striker.
On the same street.
Opposite him. My
Wow.
mum, my mum was his wife's friend. They were friends, and I saw them actually a couple of years ago at Fulham Leeds, and it was really nice to catch. It was really
Oh,
because
wow.
what happened to my mum. It was really nice to catch up with them,
Yeah.
and that they remembered me, and they were chatting about my family and stuff, and they were not, they were friends, and we were sort of the posh bit outside of Leeds where the footballers lived. We lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved into Headingley where my mum had grown up.
Right.
Um, but I would be in Alan's kitchen. I can remember seeing him, being a little boy, looking up, watching him opening the suitcase
Yeah.
after he'd come back from the '70 World Cup.
Wow.
And I can remember another time him giving me mud splattered sock tags, and he took my autograph book into Ellen Road and came back with all the players' autographs.
Wow.
So very early on, that was just to have your hero living opposite. And
Yeah.
I had a kind of white, heavy cotton shirt with an 8 on the back that was sewn on.
Right.
So this is late '60s, early '70s. And at that time, Leeds were the best team in the country. Between 65 and 75, Leeds got more points than anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's the case. We were regulars in the finals. We were in European finals. We were in the FA Cup finals. We were in 3 finals in 4 years.
Mm.
So they were a big team. Like young kids now would be into Man City.
Yeah.
That's what it was like. But I lived there. I lived in Leeds. I grew up in Leeds. Norman Hunter had a sports shop round the corner from me, and my mate
Right.
and I worked in it. That's when he was a little bit older. But I remember I used to go and hang out with my mate because he'd ring me and say, Norman's coming in today. So these stars, I mean, Norman had a World Cup winners medal later in life. He was in the squad. Jack Charlton had one.
Yeah.
Paul Madeley Paul Madeley was a millionaire with his brother from selling paint.
Really?
Yeah, Peter Lorimer had a drainage clearance company. They invested in all these things. So they were very they were there, they were ever present. And they
Yeah.
were players, England didn't qualify for the World Cup throughout the '70s, but
Yeah.
Scotland, and Leeds had about 5 or 6 Scotland players, the keepers, David Harvey, David Stewart, the great Eddie Gray,
Yeah.
Frank Gray, his younger brother, Billy Bremner, obviously, captain of
Yeah.
Scotland, Joe
McQueen.
Jordan,
Yeah.
Gordon McQueen, and then later than that, people like Arthur Graham. So with Wales, the two big captains of Wales, Terry Yorath and Brian Flynn, were Leeds players.
Yeah.
Johnny Jazz was the captain of Ireland. So when these tournaments were on, even though England weren't in, Leeds were there, which brings us on to the next shirt.
Yeah, so like you've gone rogue with this, a wild card. I like it. So you wanted just kind of a generic choice of the white shirt of Leeds United for the last, what is it, 60 years?
It is the early '60s. Bremner and Revy went to watch um, Glasgow Rangers play Real Madrid, and
Hmm.
it was an important game. That Ferguson was at that game as well,
Hmm. Okay.
and watched it. And Real Madrid, gave a classic performance. And Revy, what looked at that performance and decided he was going to change the Leeds kit. He'd been a player.
Right.
He'd been a famous player for England and Man City, and then he spent his final days at Leeds, and he was player, then became player coach. And the Leeds shirt in those days was blue with a gold V-neck.
Okay.
So that was the kit.
Right.
That's why Leeds still have blue and yellow associated.
Right. Right.
So it was a blue with a gold V-neck, and he decided he was going to emulate Real Madrid in his ambitions as a
Mm.
manager. So he wanted to take the shirt. So that's where that came from. And then just throughout the years, by far the purer the white, by pure I mean the less cluttered,
Yeah.
the less statements, the less sponsors.
Yeah.
Right, the better the shirt has been.
Right.
And I couldn't really pick one for you. I mean, the one obviously I love is just a simple, pure white with nothing on it, but the smiley badge or the illustrated vertical logo of LUFC in kind
Yeah.
of italic
Yeah.
uh, serif font. So, but then there were so many different eras, that you see a all white shirt. Swansea had all white for a while.
Mm.
But that was it. That was our kit. Whereas if you see a red shirt with white shorts, it might be Barnsley, it might be Manchester,
Got
United.
you.
They
Okay.
haven't got the black shorts, or
Yeah.
there were lots. There were might be an Arsenal shirt or whatever. Northampton, I think, wear red. There are different teams that wear different colours.
Yeah.
Whereas we had all white, and we were the only club I think who wore that.
And it makes you stand out, as you say, and it's a pure thing, as you say as well, pure memories.
Yeah, so that was that. And then, when I worked for the club in the '90s doing the magazine, they had some good shirts then, with a good era
Yeah.
between Wilkinson and then that sort of like when Howard joined at the end of the '80s through to when O'Leary was fired
Yeah.
in the early 2000s. It was a good period. Um, we won the league. We got to semi-finals of Champions League. Went
Yeah. Yeah.
to Wembley with the Charity Shield and the League Cup. Won the Charity Shield, lost the League Cup to Villa, but it was a great period to be a football fan, and to be a fan of Leeds was brilliant. We had so many homegrown players that we
Right.
loved. The obvious ones were people like David Batty and Gary Speed, but we also got an array of interesting and fascinating foreign players like Eric Cantona, Tony Yeboah,
Yeah.
Jim Floyd Hasselbank, and then later,
Cool. Yeah.
and then later another generation of kids like Kuehl and Alan Smith and young Stephen McPhail, Gary Kelly, Ian Hart. I mean, those
Mm.
three were from Ireland, which cemented the relationship with the Irish fan base. Um, and it was never really boring at all in that period. We always had one player who would be exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, there
Yeah.
were times when it didn't actually, you know what? It was fucking boring when George Graham took over.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And we didn't actually have our most exciting player then was probably Haaland's dad. Actually, so I'm wrong there. Correct myself. The George Graham 18 months was pretty desperate, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we still qualified for Europe.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, that wasn't a great time.
But most of that time it was exciting, as you say, a lot of kind of ups and downs. And I guess it brings us up to the present era. So you've chosen a relatively modern shirt. So this is I think it's a green and navy away shirt. It's the first year of Bielsa in the Premier League.
Yeah, it was great news that Adidas were going to come back and were going to. I don't know if it was the first time. It might have been the first time Adidas had made the lead shirt.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
I've got a couple of mates who work for Adidas, so they told me
Ah,
a year before,
okay.
and then they promised me not to tell anybody. They said you mustn't let. I mean, obviously it's big business, but they're
Yeah.
like good friends. So I didn't tell anybody. So I put it on Twitter. I've had some great news about something that's going to happen next
You
year.
shared it on Twitter.
No, but I didn't say what it was.
Oh, see, right, okay.
And it went from people going, "Go on, tell us," through to people saying, "Oh, you're just making it up for attention." But it wasn't. It was that Adidas were going to do the kit.
Yeah.
And then I went and I hosted a panel about football shirts with two of the guys from Adidas. One is a young guy from Manchester called Inigo, who's a shirt designer.
Yeah, I know him, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a brilliant story about how he started out drawing shirts and of Man
Mm.
United, and he ended up designing their shirt. And then there was a big collector from Holland.
Okay.
I think his Instagram is House of Football Shirts or something like that.
Right.
And Neil Hurd had written the football book shirt
Yeah,
book.
yeah.
And it was interesting talking to those guys. So Inigo again told me a little bit that he wouldn't. He said, "I'm not allowed to discuss." I was getting into him saying, "What can you tell me about Leeds shirt?" He said, "I can't discuss contract. I can't discuss what we're working on,"
Okay.
which told me that he was working on it. If he'd said, "What are you talking about?"
Mm.
But
Right.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But so that was exciting. And then Leeds have had a lot of bad kits. I mean, we had one when we were in the Championship. I remember I always think of Johnny Howson wearing it, and it looked like somebody had pissed all over the shirt, or at best you could say it was nicotine's coloured. Horrible. It was was not a colour you'd want to wear. And then it was this, and then just bad. And then Adidas arrived, and the first season I wasn't a big fan of the white shirt. It had a kind of press stud attachment at the top. I've got one upstairs, and that was like an Airtex thing as well.
Okay.
But I really like the away shirt. There'd been a similar one when in the sort of Brolin, Gary McAllister, late Wilkinson era.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Brian Dean had worn a similar one, and I think that's where they'd gone for the kind of the influence. But I always think of Rodrigo wearing it when he showed up.
Yeah.
My dad doesn't like football, so as a kid he would come and watch me play when I was a kid, but he wouldn't. He never played it himself. He would never take me to Ellen Road.
Yeah.
I used to go with my mates on the bus. Um, but he said to me, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I said, "Well, if you don't mind me buying it, I'd like this new Leeds shirt. It's green, it's got a dark green and a dark blue." And I just thought it looked good. And he called me from the shop. He surprised me and he said, "What name do you want on the back?"
Wow. Okay.
So it really put me on the spot a bit because, it's a little bit like girlfriends' names in tattoos. You wouldn't want to have a player's name on who you fell out, who joined a team you hated,
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, of
for
course.
instance, or did something that you were embarrassed about, or just faded away, or whatever. And equally, I don't want to be stuck in one era with football.
Hmm.
I like the idea of we were about where we're now. So I asked them to put Joe Strummer's name on it.
Cool. Okay.
So it just says Strummer
Yeah.
77.
Nice. Okay.
The years with Bielsa were as good as anything I've seen with O'Leary or Wilkinson, or even as a kid.
Right.
They were so exciting. What he encapsulated, the sense of excitement. He was a good man. He took his time to talk to kids. He'd get out of cars and go and chat to kids who were
Yeah.
disabled.
Yeah.
He walked to and from the training ground. He was humble in that respect. He turned down lifts. He lived in a terraced house above a sweet shop in Wetherby,
Right.
not a gated mansion,
Yeah.
down the road like the players would have done.
Yeah.
And he united everybody. And it was a
Mm.
great time. Before he even finished signing his gargantuan contract, he ordered for Calvin Phillips to go in 3 weeks before everyone else and do intense fitness training.
Right. Okay.
Calvin was a little bit like Moat, he was at Middlesbrough. He's an attacking, slightly chubby midfielder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Bielsa saw in him that he could be a really good kind of quarterback, basically.
Yeah.
Defensive midfielder who could play the ball perfectly around. And they were he got so much out of it. He turned bog standard ordinary players into legends for us. You
Yeah.
brought the soul and the passion out in players like Liam Cooper, who, Liam's probably played like 60, 70, maybe even 100 Premier League games now. I don't know, maybe less, 870 something.
Yeah.
Before that, it was called League One Liam.
Yeah, he'd been capped for Scotland too, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And the
Yeah.
same with Luke Ayling, the passion the guy's got for the game and the club shines. He's like the heart of the team. And
Yeah.
Stuart Dallas, very early on when Bielsa first arrived, Dallas wasn't figuring rather in the first few games, and Norwich came in for him. I think they'd possibly been relegated and wanted to get up again. Oh no, we were still there. No, they'd been. I think they'd been promoted when
Right.
they wanted Dallas. And Bielsa, even though he hadn't played him, said, "How can I let a man like Stuart go? His commitment to his fellow players and his heart and his belief in the team is immense." It's like, and I mean, he was just the very first press conference he ever did. He spoke at length about Gianni Alioski's sprint ability,
Okay.
how fast he could run for so long.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Alioski was a 100-meter sprinter. He
Wow.
wasn't like most of us. He wasn't like a 15-yard sprinter
Yeah, yeah.
who burst for. And and just his love of football. He was a one-off, and it was absolutely insane that having had the foresight and the ambition to hire this guy
Mm.
and have success with him, because it wasn't only coming up. We finished ninth.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
To not have a way to work with him to give him the quality of player that he needed,
Yeah.
which they subsequently did with Marsh.
It's too late.
Yeah, it meant that between Bielsa's desire not to have really expensive, experienced players not playing each week, that's what it was. He wanted a thin squad,
Yeah.
so he didn't have people who he felt were being wasted. And then they'd had a couple of, they weren't that great in the transfer market. We always would spend too much money, or we wouldn't get enough money for sales.
Yeah.
And then we'd bought Robin Koch, and then he got injured straight away playing for Germany, like a
Right.
week later. And then we had to buy Lorente, and then he got injured. And
Yeah.
so there were a couple of unfortunate things like that where injuries bit early on and affected us. But the second season in the Premier League, if they'd spent the money they spent at the end of the second season, bringing in Tyler Adams, Aronson, Christensen,
Mm.
later in that season, Georgie Rutter, a ridiculous amount of money when we didn't need a young hopeful. We needed an experienced striker.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe they didn't want to pile the debt up, but even given the lesson that we learned under the Ridgedale era, I think they had reason to pile debt up. You
Mm-hmm.
finish ninth, you have to back it up. You have to. I mean,
Take a gamble.
anybody who says, "Oh, Leeds got found out," and I hear Leeds fans saying that, they just don't know what they're talking about. If you compare the bench on the March,
Mm-hmm.
which would have Klitsch, Ayling, Forshaw, Cooper, stalwarts of
Yeah.
Rodrigo, stalwarts of the Bielsa era.
Yeah.
Whilst new players started, but Bielsa never had that. Some of the players that were on the bench for us aren't even in football anymore. He
Wow.
had he often had children on the bench. He had
Wow.
under 18s on the bench, and a couple of them have gone on and done well. Jack Clark has done as this season seems to have done well at Sunderland,
Yeah.
and Leif Davis has got promoted from Ipswich. But we're talking about players who've made their names in coming out of the third division.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So we had Archie Gray, a 15-year-old, was what the fans started to hope would be. He's going to be the saviour,
Mm.
and it's just ridiculous. So that's what went wrong. But largely, I don't have any sadness about what happened, just how it ended.
So James, look, the book's out now, and it's coming out in paperback soon as well.
Today,
It's coming out today.
when are you putting this out?
This will probably go out tomorrow, I think. So it'll come out on the
Okay,
26th of
so
May.
the paperback for Animal House will be in shops tomorrow, or it's already on Amazon and people like Waterstones online, and most importantly, the independent bookshops that need your support. So,
Nice.
and also, if anyone wants a signed paperback or hardback, if they go to my social, which is James Brown on Twitter and Instagram, I've
Hmm.
been selling them signed and dedicated. So I've sold about 400 like that, which people
Wow.
like. People have enjoyed them, and the audio book has been popular.
Nice. Okay.
Only because I break down laughing at how stupid some of the stories that happened 30 years ago.
Nice. Okay. Well, look, mate, as I say, I really enjoy it, really highly recommend. And it's great to chat, mate. Thanks so much for doing
Yeah, it
it.
was a really good interview. Thank you, Craig, and good luck with the podcast.
So there you have it. Massive thanks to James for sharing his football kit memories with me. You can follow me on Instagram or get in touch via Twitter or email. James's book Animal House is published by Quercus Books and is out now. Make sure you follow him on socials too. The music you heard was produced by Evil Ed. You can check out his music on his Bandcamp page. There's links to absolutely everything I mentioned there in the notes section of the podcast too. And finally, thanks to you for listening. If you have enjoyed it, please do spread the word. Give me a follow on social, get on Apple, get on Spotify, wherever you listen, and write me a review, which can really help the podcast grow. Sharing is caring. And other than that, I guess that's it. So until next time with my next guest, whoever that might be, whenever that might be, I'll catch you soon.